Let me ask you guys a question. Why would an old Garp, not in his prime, be the strongest marine in this current generation? Yes, he was the strongest in his generation, but what purpose does it serve for him to remain the strongest even now? I want you guys to think about it in that lens. As much as I love power scaling, we have to look at these things from a story's perspective, because even though power scaling is important in One Piece, the story always comes before it. Why do you think Oda likes to reiterate things like this? To hype up Prime Garp probably? To remind us he's not as strong as he used to be? I think so. Wouldn't it be weird this is a person Oda wants to convey as the strongest marine right now? A character that he's reminding us constantly that he got weaker? I think that would be kind of weird. I know everyone is waiting or probably saying Garp over Akainu right now, especially if he beats Aokiji in like 2 chapters or something. Obviously it took Akainu 11 days to defeat Aokiji, and if it takes Garp any less time than that, people are automatically going to jump to the conclusion that Garp is stronger than Akainu. In power scaling terms, that 100% makes sense, but it's just not that simple for me. But I'm here to explain to you guys why I believe Akainu versus Garp is completely one-sided, and once again, this is my opinion. If you're a person that's going to complain to me that I'm using headcanon and you don't like that and all you want is feats, then this video is not for you. So the first thing I want to mention is obviously Akainu's rank as the fleet's admiral. Many people tend to underrate what this really means because they don't view Akainu as an extremely strong character based on his showings in Marineford. People also tend to underplay Mihawk's potential too based on his Marineford performance as well, which I always found dumb. Oda is going to make them as strong as he needs to be without factoring Marineford power scaling. He's not sitting there with a pen like, oh shit, Mihawk can't be that strong in a series because I had this guy clashing with Vista. Oh, Akainu can't be that strong because back in Marineford, if I remember correctly, I had an old sick Whitebeard giving him the work. I can't make him that strong. I'd like to believe Oda is not looking at the story through the same lens we are when it comes to how strong he wants to make a character. The previous fleet admiral, as we know, was Sengoku, and he has Conqueror's Haki. He was also pretty strong. Sengoku was very respected in the previous generation by the former Pirate King and the people. When the Marines went to go capture and attack the Roger pirates, and specifically Roger did not want to fight them because they weren't a challenge to them. But Roger specified the Marines that were. Y'all know Garp was his rival in a way, and they were definitely on par. Roger basically said, bring me someone stronger than these guys, but he didn't only mention Garp. He said, bring me Garp or Sengoku. Implies here that Sengoku has the strength to somewhat challenge the Pirate King, and he talks about him in the same breath as Garp, who rivals Roger in strength as well. And we know Sengoku had the strength to later on become the fleet admiral. The fleet admiral is now Sakazuki, aka Akainu. Why should the current day fleet admiral not live up to the expectations and strength to the previous one? If the previous one was able to give a good fight to the Pirate King, I think the current one should be able to as well. In this current generation, these characters, the Marines, the Yonkos like Blackbeard, Shanks, Akainu, these characters have to be at a certain level in order to really test the new generation that we know is going to surpass the previous one. Why have the strongest characters in the previous generation that we're not following, but when it comes to the current generation that's supposed to test the new generation, they are not as powerful? The fleet admiral of this generation shouldn't downgrade, it should only get better, especially since there's only one fleet admiral. Hence he should be stronger than Prime Sengoku in my opinion, which would result in him being stronger than a Garp that's not in his prime, because Sengoku in his prime obviously to me is stronger than a washed Garp at his old age. Oda has been hyping up the final war for years now, and it's 100% going to contain the world government. If the world government is involved, that means so are the Marines. Akainu has been sending out admirals the whole post time skip. For example, Greenbow to Wano, Fuji to Dressrosa, and now Kizaru to Egghead Island. And it's almost like Akainu is being reserved while his dogs are doing the dirty work. The moment Akainu has to get his hands dirty is going to be the final war most likely, where most of the new generation are going to be near their peak in strength. And a very common aspect of writing in anime, and especially shonen, the villains you fight later on in the series tend to be stronger than the previous ones. If that wasn't the case, the fights would be boring and they would have no real obstacle. But this all depends on who these villains fight, and that leads me to my next segment. I also believe Akainu and Luffy are destined to have a battle. I know everyone won't see eye to eye with me because Sabo seems to be the favorite to fight Akainu, but those reasons are usually along the lines of Sabo wasn't there to help Ace, or he now has his devil fruit so he inherited his will, or that the Revolutionary Army are going to be the ones to fight the world government and the Marines, so that means Sabo could fight Akainu. But when it comes to Luffy versus Akainu, there's real parallels and evidence in the story that makes this matchup more likely. Akainu's the man to kill Ace right in Luffy's arms. Luffy was too weak, hence why Ace died protecting Luffy. He didn't die protecting Sabo, but he died protecting Luffy. Luffy was traumatized by what Akainu did to the point where this man had his mouth open wide for like 90 episodes. Like, this guy was in the craziest amount of shock. And on Amazon Lily, he literally lost his mind to the point where he almost killed himself. Akainu is the only person in the series to ever break Luffy's will. He had him questioning his whole existence, which I find to be extremely crazy. Luffy is debatably the most strong-willed character in the series. To further emphasize the impact that Akainu had on Luffy, after the time skip, Jinbei is telling Luffy about Blackbeard, who we all know is an inevitable end of series fight for Luffy, seemingly to obtain the One Piece. And he was eating and did not give two fucks when Jinbei was explaining this. But when Akainu was mentioned, Luffy started to grab his chest and his scars started to throb, showing there's a personal connection between Luffy and Akainu. Speaking of scars, Akainu is also responsible for that scar Luffy wears on his chest. Scars are an important thing in One Piece. Shank's scars still aches because of Blackbeard. Blackbeard and Shanks have a history and are more than likely to cross paths later on in the series. Kaido's whole existence and character revolves around that scar Odin gave him, and he wished to feel the thrill that Odin once gave him. Zoro's scar is from the man he will one day surpass. Relevant and important characters that have scars, it's usually an important part of them. But to wrap this up, saying all this, I do indeed have Akainu over old Garp, and even if the feats don't show that. Akainu has to be at a certain level that even eclipses an old Garp and even Aokiji, regardless of the feats he had prior. So regardless of him having an 11-day fight with Aokiji or Garp defeating Aokiji in less days, all that stuff definitely does not matter to me because Akainu is just gonna be on another level. But oh my god, he was going back and forth with an old sick dying Whitebeard who wasn't even using Conqueror's Haki, and Garp is healthy and he does use Conqueror's Haki, and he defeated Aokiji in less days. How can you say he's stronger? I can't blame you guys for looking at it from that approach, but for me, I value portrayal a lot in One Piece when I look at power scaling. And this is one of those things where Akainu's status as the fleet admiral and his relevance towards the end of the series is going to play a huge factor into his strength, hence why I believe he has to be very, very strong and he needs to be the strongest marine right now, and it would make the most sense.